right, hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. I wanted to welcome everyone to the NMDOT's public involvement meeting for the New Mexico 68 US 84 285 alignment study. The purpose of the meeting is to present the results of the roadway study and the recommended alternatives and improvements. Just as a little heads up, the presentation is slated to be about 30 minutes long. We have a couple options for participating this evening. For those of you who are on the phone, if you are dialing in via a smartphone, you can dial *8 now, and that will trigger a text message to go to your phone that has a link to the web page that we've set up for live streaming. So that project web page has the live stream of the presentation, so you can follow along with the slides as we go through this evening and see all the visuals. If you are already on the website, you should be seeing the stream now. All participants are going to be muted throughout the presentation, but you will, of course, have an opportunity to speak at the end of the presentation during the question and answer session. If you have joined the meeting on your phone, I will explain at the end of the presentation how to submit a question or comment via phone. And if you have joined the meeting online, you will already see that there is a submission box below the screen where you can enter in a question or comment for the team. I would want to introduce Mr. Paul Brasher, who is the NMDOT District 5 engineer. He's going to be providing a brief overview of the district program. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you so much. This is Paul Brasher. I am the New Mexico Department of Transportation District 5 engineer in New Mexico. The highways are managed, maintained, administered, designed, constructed, and funded in 6 highway districts. This happens to be District 5, which consists of San Juan County, Rio Arriba County, Taos County, Los Alamos County, Santa Fe County, and Torrance County. That is District 5. Española and New Mexico 68 happens to be in District 5, within District 5's jurisdiction. First, I want to welcome everybody and thank you all for taking the time and effort to participate in this public involvement meeting for our presentation of the study and your comments. As you all, most of you probably know, New Mexico 68 originates at the US 84-285 corridor in Española. It runs about 50 miles north through El Prado to the north side of Taos at the intersection of New Mexico 522, 150, and US 64. Along its route, New Mexico 68 serves residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, and recreational land uses as an important corridor to northern New Mexico in this region of the state. This is just how you get to northern New Mexico, is up New Mexico 68 through Española. We realize that, and it's not lost on us in the study, the significance of this corridor here. The project represents the alignment study of just over 4 miles of this corridor, and it presents design features intended to address community concerns for safety, access, mobility, and pedestrian needs, traffic operations, such as signs, signals, and markings, and then drainage at the same time. At the outset of the study, we assembled a team of highly qualified, experienced consultants and New Mexico Department of Transportation staff to undertake this important project to the benefit of the state, the counties, the city of Española, the residents, the businesses, and the neighboring tribal entities. Our priorities are always safety, economy, multimodal mobility, environmental stewardship, and cultural heritage preservation. We've incorporated these priorities into each element of this study. Again, without much further ado, I want to thank everybody for being part of this effort, and let's go ahead and proceed with this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. I do want to let everyone know that there is a poll element to this presentation as well. There are 5 questions that we would appreciate everyone participating to respond to, and you can do that whether you're joining by phone or online. For those of you who are joining online, you should already be able to see that poll and respond to that poll at any point. It looks like everyone, or not everyone, some people are already participating in that. For those of you who are on the phone, I'm going to read out the question and then the options and what number to dial is associated with each answer. So if you'd like to respond, you can use your keypad. So our first poll question is, do you live or work in Española? This just gives us a little bit of background information about where attendees for tonight's meeting are coming from, what their perspective is on the project. So if you live in Española, you would press 1 on your keypad. If you work in Española, you would press 2. If you both live and work in Española, press 3. If you neither live nor work in Española, you're going to press 4. So again, we appreciate the participation in that poll, and there will be 4 additional poll questions that we'll be rolling out during the presentation. Okay, I'm now going to introduce the study team representatives for the project from DOT. You've already met Paul Brasher. He's the NMDOT District 5 engineer, engineer. We have Naomi Gady. She is the lead project development engineer. We also have Sarah Anderson. She is the supporting project development engineer. We have Javier Martinez. He is the District 5 assistant district engineer. And for the consulting team, we have Steve Harris from NV5. He's the project manager. We have Adam Miera, who's the traffic engineer from NV5. We have Chris Bonanno, the design engineer from NV5. We have myself, Laura Thompson, and Teresa Hurt from SWCA Environmental, which covers cultural, natural resources, and environmental policy compliance. So at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Steve Harris, who again is the project manager with NV5 Engineering.
Thank you, Laura. Just jumping right into this, the guiding documents used by the NMDOT for the development of a roadway study is called the Location Study Procedure. And while the guide provides an outline to evaluate the most complex transportation project, it emphasizes the process is appropriate for most common project scopes as well. The guide is also intended to establish consistency in how location studies are prepared, reviewed, and processed by the NMDOT. This slide that we're showing you here provides a schematic of the location study process and indicates where we are within the study process. We're currently at the end of the phase B of the alignment study and have prepared a detailed final evaluation of alternatives. And we'd like to hear your comments and questions to assist in the final analysis of the report. Following the meeting and submittal of the final report to the New Mexico Department of Transportation, we will proceed to what's called Phase 1C, environmental documentation, and also we will begin Phase 1D, which is we refer to as preliminary design, which will take us through 30% design on the project. And then the third public meeting will be held during the Phase 1D preliminary design. This slide shows the limits of the Phase AB study for US 84-285 and New Mexico 68 in Española and New Mexico 68 north of the city limits on the Oquea-Wingay Pueblo. US 84-285, shown in orange and also referenced as segments A and B in the study report, is in substantial compliance with current design standards, and it is actually in good condition with only minor deficiencies. So we are currently recommending that US 84-285 segments A and B not be advanced as part of this study to the design phases, and that they be considered for a separate rehabilitation project, which the district would subsequently program separately from this project. And that would likely be some sort of resurfacing. New Mexico 68 is being recommended for advancement to the design and will really be the focus of today's presentation. For the purpose of planning and construction, the New Mexico 68 project in Española has been divided into 3 projects. The location study procedure, next slide, pardon me. The location study procedure, dated 2015, refers to the term purpose and need to explain why the NMDOT is undertaking the proposed action and what its objectives are. Purpose and need provide the basis for developing the performance measures for the evaluation of alternatives. In the alignment study process, need is identifies the existing transportation deficiencies or problems that may need to be addressed in the following categories. Those categories are physical deficiencies, travel demand and congestion, safety, system connectivity, access, and economic development. The need for the New Mexico 68 projects are: the facility is in poor and deteriorating condition. It does not meet the current design and safety standards for a primary arterial, and does not meet design and safety standards for multimodal access, which is to say for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit use.
I wanted to say that we have another poll question. We would like to ask whether you own a business along the corridor. For those of you who are joining by phone, if you want to answer yes to this question, press 1. If you want to answer no to this question, press 2. Sorry for the interruption, Steve. And
no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Turn it over to you.
So the location study procedure refers to purpose and... Okay, we already did that. I apologize. Let me hit the forward button. The purpose of the New Mexico 68 project is to correct the physical and structural deficiencies, provide a safer and more reliable transit arterial, improve roadway mobility and accessibility, and to improve multimodal access along the New Mexico 68 corridor through the city of Española and the adjoining areas of the Ocoee-Wingu Pueblo. And again, when I say multimodal, I'm talking about bicycle and pedestrian and transit. I will now turn the presentation over to our design engineer, Christopher Bonanno, to discuss local access along the corridor. Chris?
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. So one of the major issues we looked on the corridor was access control, which is to say how and where people get to or from the mainline roadway from the various businesses and side streets in the area. Now, the State Access Management Manual, which is one of the controlling documents for the project, states that property owners abutting a public road have a right of reasonable access, but that the right of access is subject to regulation for the purpose of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the traveling public. So problems we identified on the project corridor can be broken down into 2 basic areas. There's driveway access and there's median access. The driveways on New Mexico 68 are often too large or too close together, as you can see in the photo in the upper right side of the slide. This creates situations where multiple cars stack up next to each other while waiting to turn, and when this happens, drivers on the main line can be unsure where or how many vehicles will turn, and where the sight lines of the turning vehicles are obstructed by other turning vehicles. And the other problem we identified was the 2-way continuous left turn lane in the median, as shown in the graphic on the bottom. This area can create conflicts where multiple left-turning drivers on both the main line and from the side streets can attempt to occupy the same space, so you get traffic collisions. With these problems in mind, our goals for the project are to limit access conflicts where multiple turning vehicles attempt to share the same space, separate these conflict points, which limits the locations where accidents are possible, separate turning and through traffic using tools such as median curbs or designated turn lanes, and promote shared access, where we create opportunities for multiple businesses or side roads to share a single driveway or access point. I'll now turn the presentation back to Steve Harris to continue to talk about the alternatives that we looked at.
So before we actually get into the alternatives, I'd just like to present this to you. Following our assessments of existing conditions and evaluations of purpose and need, which include public and stakeholder input, we prepared multiple matrices to evaluate both roadway and intersection alternatives through the corridor. This process allows us to narrow the list of alternatives, rank the alternatives, and to make a recommendation for the preferred alternative that will be carried into the final study report and design. Each alternative that we considered was scored based on how well it addressed each performance factor. 3 roadway and 3 intersection matrices were prepared for the New Mexico 68 portion of the corridor study. Additionally, we use color coding in our alternative matrix to provide a visual image of the strength and weakness of each alternative. So if you look at the slide, you'll see red means that there is a significant negative impact associated with the evaluation of a factor for a specific alternative. Yellow means that there are moderate to minor impacts associated with the evaluation factors for the specific alternative, but that it otherwise meets the purpose and need. And green means that there is little to no negative impact associated with the evaluation factor for a specific alternative, and that it meets the study purpose and need. The alternatives with the highest ranking, or I should say the alternative with the highest ranking, is typically recommended as the preferred alternative and is advanced to the final recommendation in the study report. But there's some flexibility in ranking when rankings are close. 2 to 5 alternatives were carried forward into Phase B, into the Phase B report for each segment and ranked using this method. Anyone interested in more information or seeing the full evaluation matrix prepared for each alternative is welcome to take a look at the Phase B report evaluation on the project website that Laura has and will reference later on in the presentation. This slide summarizes the public and stakeholder issues that we have received from the project website, emails, and the first public and stakeholder meetings. This information was subsequently used in ranking and evaluating the alternatives for the project. For clarification, we've grouped the issues and comments into 7 categories on the slide. They are safety, access, multimodal, which addresses pedestrian, bicycle, and public transit, operations, that's like signals and how the lights work out there, drainage, cultural and environmental, and right-of-way and utilities. The urban portion in New Mexico 68 was divided into 2 segments. Oh, that's right. Time for a question.
It is. I wanted to announce the release of the next poll question for folks to respond to. For those of you on the phone, I'll read it out. What do you feel is the greatest priority for improvement along the study corridor? So if you feel that deteriorating pavement is the greatest priority, press 1. For unsafe conditions for pedestrians and cyclists, press 2. For deficient street lighting, press 3. For deficient stormwater drainage, press 4. Or for poor traffic operations, for example, sight distances or access points, press 5. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. This is a new option for us, so bear with us on it. I'm getting used to it, of having the live questions, which is cool, but I still have to get used to it. The urban portion of New Mexico 68 was divided into 3 segments. C and D, as you can see on the slide, for the purposes of the evaluation of the cross sections. So we're talking about roadway here. Segment C, highlighted in blue on the slide, currently has on-street parking on one side of the roadway and begins at the intersection of US 84, 285 and extends to the intersection with New Mexico 76. Segment D, highlighted in yellow, has no on-street parking and begins at the intersection of 76 and extends to the north to the Española city limits. Both segments include mixed residential, commercial, with some agricultural development. For New Mexico 68 south of New Mexico 76, the roadway sections shown on the slides are recommended as the preferred alternatives. Both alternatives shown on the slide include a 4-lane divided highway with raised curb and gutter, sidewalk, bike lanes, on-street parking on one side of the road, street lighting, and they both fit within the existing right-of-way. Alternative C1 provides a continuous 2-way left turn lane without a raised median island. That's on top. And alternative C2 on the bottom adds a raised median island to limit left turn access between intersections as needed. C2 alternative will be applied when safety constraints and/or median access controls require it. For New Mexico 68 segment D, between New Mexico 76 and the Española northern city limits, typical sections D1 and D2 are recommended as the preferred alternatives. These alternatives include a 4-lane divided highway with raised curb and gutter, sidewalks, bike lanes, street lighting, and they also fit within the right-of-way. Alternative D1 provides a continuous 2-way left turn lane without a raised median, and alternative D2 adds a raised median island to limit left turn access between intersections as needed. D2 alternative would be applied when safety constraints and median access control is required, same as Section C. The New Mexico 68 rural portion of the study, segment E, shown in green, begins at the Española northern city limits and extends past Popey Avenue intersection to the 4.2 milepost. This section includes mixed residential, agricultural, and commercial development. Next slide. For New Mexico 68 segment E, we got to go for another question.
Yep. Only 2 more. We've got slide 13 and slide 18. So you only have 1 more at slide 18. Okay, so we have another poll question. For those of you on the phone, I'll read it out again. So which describes your primary activity along the study corridor? If your primary activity is running errands within the city, press 1. If the primary activity is driving through Española, press 2. If your primary activity is visiting businesses along the study corridor, press 3. Or if your primary activity along the study corridor is to access other city streets, press 4. All right, Steve.
For New Mexico 68 segment E, which is shown in green on the map, sorry.
Am I 1 slide ahead? Do I need to be here?
You may have been. You should be on 14, I believe. Am I correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
So for New Mexico 68 segment E, from the Española northern city limits to the end of the project at the 4.2 milepost. And by the way, the 4.2 milepost is where there is the construction north of the city currently starts, just as a reference for those of you that live in the area. Typical section E1 and E2 are recommended as preferred alternatives. Alternative E1 stays within the current roadway alignment for the north and southbound lanes, widens the shoulders to provide additional space for emergency parking, transit, and bicycle access, and substantially matches the roadway section currently under construction north of the 4.2 milepost. Alternative E2 narrows the existing median and adds a raised mountable median curb to create a physical and visual change from that of the rural typical section north of Popey Avenue to encourage speed reduction south of Popey Avenue. This alternative also widens the shoulders to provide space for emergency parking, transit, and bicycle access. Next slide. 10 signalized intersections and 7 unsignalized intersections were also analyzed in the study corridor. Paseo de Oñate, Fairview, and Pope Avenue were identified to have geometric, safety, and operational deficiencies. Of the remaining signalized and unsignalized intersection, deficiencies are minor, and changes to those locations could include upgrades to traffic signal equipment and sequencing, and improvements to pedestrian and bicycle access. Next slide. The recommended alternative for Paseo de Oñate is option number 1, geometric adjustments. In this option, the advantages are the intersection configuration is simplified. The eastbound Paseo de Oñate movements are all moved to the southern intersection. It elimination of unrestricted merges from the eastbound Paseo de Oñate to the southbound New Mexico 68. That's the existing condition has a slip ramp onto the southbound lanes, creating kind of a blind merge. Improving safety and visibility for drivers turning onto southbound New Mexico 68. It also provides pedestrian and bicycle accessibility, improves business access at the intersection. It accommodates turning radii for large trucks at the intersection. The disadvantage is there is some minor right-of-way impacts associated with the intersection that we'll have to work with the adjacent landowners in the area. Paseo de Oñate option 1 meets the purpose and need, and we are recommending it as the preferred alternative for the intersection. Preferred alternative for Fairview Lane is option number 1, which is also geometric adjustments. This option was developed in line with the City of Española's 2020 Fairview Lane Corridor Safety Improvements Plan that also identified it as a preferred alternative for the intersection. The advantages to this intersection is the design straightens out or realigns the east and westbound through lanes on Fairview Lane. It expands the right turn curb radii to accommodate large vehicles that are currently using the adjacent lanes when turning. And the pedestrian crosswalks and curb ramps are realigned so that they are not skewed to the intersection or traffic. And the one disadvantage is, again, the same. There are minor right-of-way impacts anticipated at the intersection corners to accommodate these improvements. Fairview Lane option 1 meets the purpose and need, and we're recommending it as the preferred alternative for the intersection. Next slide. Preferred alternative for Pope Avenue is option number 2, a roundabout. And the advantages for the roundabout are it realigns Pope Avenue with New Mexico 68. It provides a safer environment for pedestrians and bicyclists. It corrects intersection sight lines and blind spots. It creates visible and geometric separation between the rural and the urban areas north of Española, and it reduces the speeds approaching the urban corridor. The disadvantages are it will require more signage to alert approaching traffic of the particular style of intersection, that being a roundabout, particularly for the southbound New Mexico 68 traffic coming into town. And it may have minor right-of-way impacts associated with it. Pope Avenue option 2 best meets the purpose and need. We're recommending it as the preferred alternative for the intersection. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Laura Thompson, our environmental consultant. Laura?
Thanks, Steve. All right, before I launch into the next slide, I do want to release our last poll question of the evening. So for those of you on the phone, I'll read it out loud. How do you feel the proposed road improvement project would affect you? If you feel it would affect you positively, you can press 1 on your phone. If you feel it would affect you negatively, you can press 2. If you don't feel it would affect you, you can press 3. If you're not sure whether it would affect you, you can press 4. Okay, and I do want to address a few admin questions before I begin the slide. There was a question that was submitted about making the screen bigger because it was hard to see. I'm guessing that person is joining on the website, and you'll see that there is an arrow, set of arrows in the lower right hand corner. I believe if you click on that, it should make the screen bigger and easier to see. Also, as we're nearing the end of the formal presentation, we want you guys to start submitting questions if they've occurred to you. So for those of you on the phone, if you press *3, that will send you to one of the screeners who will take your question and transcribe it and submit it into our queue so we see it. And for those of you who are joining online, of course, you'll see on the screen that there's already a text field where you can type in a question or a comment and submit it that way. So again, for those people who are on the phone, if you want to submit your question now, so the screeners can go through it and it's already queued up, ready to go by the time we reach the end of our presentation, that's *3. And you can always press *3 again if you want to withdraw that question for any reason. So the NMDOT is required by state and federal laws to assess the impacts on the environment by any proposed projects. Each phase of the project involves different components of the environmental compliance process. During Phase 1A, desktop analyses of existing conditions and assessments of potential impacts were conducted for all the initial alternatives. During the subsequent Phase 1B, the same analyses were run on their preferred alternatives. During Phase 1C, field surveys are conducted to assess the natural and cultural resources in the project area and the potential impacts on those of the selected alternative. The results of those field surveys, the potential impacts, and any mitigation strategies are included in the environmental assessment that will be written in accordance with the Bureau of Indian Affairs standards, which is submitted in Phase D of the project. So SWCA conducted a preliminary field visit during Phase A, and that took place in the fall of 2020, where we assessed whether there might be any natural resources of concern in the study area. We noted a few different noxious weeds, to include tree of heaven, Siberian elm, and tamarisk. We also took note of some water features within the study area, including the Santa Cruz River and several other drainages that cross the study area. We recorded some inactive cliff swallow nests underneath the Santa Cruz bridges. Most birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is why we take note of the suitable nesting habitat. So after a preferred alternative is chosen, SWCA will then revisit the area and conduct a field biological survey during Phase C. We'll reassess the same resources that were noted during the initial site visit, including aquatic resources, noxious weeds, migratory bird habitat, but we'll also be assessing things like whether the alternatives will affect the visual landscape or the air quality of the area, if the project area has suitable habitat for any threatened or endangered species, or whether there are any hazardous materials in the area that could be disturbed during construction. During the field survey, we identify which resources may be affected by the project, try to quantify what those impacts would be, and how impacts could be avoided. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Teresa to discuss cultural resources.
Thank you, Laura. SWCA also conducted a record search of the New Mexico Cultural Resources Information System, and we learned that numerous archaeological sites and historic buildings and structures have been recorded in the surrounding vicinity of the study area. However, the Santa Cruz River bridges just north of the intersection of US 84-285 and New Mexico 68 are the only previously recorded historic resources that actually fall within the study area boundaries. It should be noted that the previous cultural resource surveys don't provide full coverage of the study area, so a new survey of the corridor will be needed to adequately inventory the resources of the area and assess potential effects to those resources from the proposed project. Given the developed urbanized setting of much of the corridor, intact archaeological sites are not likely to be identified in the study area. However, examination of historic aerial photography does indicate that undocumented resources such as historic buildings and SWCAs are located along the corridor, and these would be recorded as part of the cultural resource survey that would be conducted during the Phase C investigations. I'll turn it back to Laura Thompson now.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, so this slide summarizes the milestones to date for the project, as well as the proposed schedule for the remaining phases. So the existing conditions analysis was completed in the spring of 2021, and the initial analysis of alternatives was then conducted in summer 2021. We had the first public meeting and stakeholder meetings in the fall of 2021. Detailed analysis of alternatives occurred from September 2021 through December 2022. We held a second stakeholder meeting in November of this year, which brings us to today, when we are conducting the second public meeting. We anticipate that the draft Phase AB report will be revised over the winter of 2022 to be completed by the spring of next year. Preliminary design is expected to continue from the spring of next year through the fall of 2023, with final design for the urban section, aka segments, to happen fall of 2023 through summer of 2024. The environmental documentation and the last public meeting is scheduled to happen concurrently in the summer of 2024. Currently, we anticipate the New Mexico 68 Española corridor will be divided, so each segment will be about 1.5 miles long. Based on the existing condition of the roadway and constructability issues, the segment from the intersection of US 84 to 85 to just north of the intersection of Fairview Lane is the highest priority. The cost for construction of this first project is estimated at approximately $20 million. We anticipate that the final design for that first project will be completed by midsummer of 2024, and that the project will be programmed into the State Transportation Improvement Plan in 2025. The actual year for construction will be subject to the availability of funds at that time. The district and the department consider this corridor to be a very high priority for reconstruction, and they remain committed to programming it expeditiously for construction. All right, that concludes the formal presentation portion of the meeting. Now it's time to move into the Q&A portion. Again, if you want to submit comments or questions for this meeting and you've joined the meeting online, you can submit those directly from the website. You can email Española@swca.com, or you can call us 505-431-2678 to make a comment. We do ask that you submit any questions or comments by January 14th. So the website that we are streaming on right now, which is swcavirtualpublicinvolvement.com/Española, also includes things like maps of the study area, recordings from the prior public meeting, the draft Phase B report, as well as contact info for the study team. Okay, so just to review, if you have joined the meeting just on your phone and you want to submit a question or a comment, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. That will send you to a screener who will transcribe your question or your comment, and that'll show up in our queue. If you are streaming the meeting online, you'll see on the bottom of the screen, there's a text box where you can type in your question and it will add it to the queue. We do have questions or comments that have been submitted both on the phone and online, so I will be taking turns, if you will, between the two sources to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Okay. I am going to start with the cell phone number ending in 7401. It looks like the question is, on the roundabout that's being proposed, will it be large enough to carry 18-wheelers successfully with the amount of traffic that goes through it? All right, and I'm going to make you live. You're able to speak.
Correct. I was just wondering if an 18-wheeler will be able to traverse the roundabout with whatever radius provided and not overlap on the, because it's 4-lane. So will it overlap into the crossing lane if there's heavy traffic?
So I'll go ahead and take the first shot at that, but I've also got my traffic engineer and my designer here so they can add to my response on this. This is Steve Harris. I'm the project manager. The roundabout has been designed to accommodate 18-wheelers. We recognize that there is a significant presence of large tractor trailer semi going through the corridor, and so that is included in the design. I probably would like to refer to my designer when it comes to how a 18-wheeler actually tracks through the roundabout, whether it crosses any of the lane assignment lines or whether it stays completely within one lane as it goes through the roundabout. Chris?
Yeah, I can absolutely. So typically when an 18-wheeler goes through a roundabout, they do utilize both lanes. It's just a function of how the intersection behaves. We do what we can to minimize that for anything smaller rather than the largest 18-wheelers. They're going to be able to stay inside their lanes. But the largest design vehicle we deal with, which is a WB67, those will typically track outside their lanes.
Correct. Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, and the WB67 is that truck that we all see on the highway with the big cab and chassis and a separate trailer. They're about 65, 67 feet long.
Yes. Okay. So
all right, thank you, Benny.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have another part of your question? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say, what happens if it just so happens that you encounter one of those large trucks, and at the same token, there is a truck pulling a boat on the other lane, and they both enter the roundabout at the same exact time? What happens in a case like that?
Our experience is this is very similar to a double left-hand turn that you see in lots of our large cities. All of them are designed that in some cases the larger vehicles do have to track a little bit wide, and really when it's part for lack of a better way to describe it, some of this is part of driver etiquette. As you're approaching it, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and if there are two 18-wheelers side by side, they have to give each other some grace. I will tell you that if you're actually in one of these things, the curbs are not what we call barrier curbs. They're what they call mountable curbs. So there is some leeway for the truck to steer wide and avoid a vehicle in the adjacent lane. But it's a pretty standard practice that anytime you have multiple lanes in a turning radius, there's some level of driver etiquette that has to be applied when people are driving through those type of facilities.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Benny. Okay, I am going to address a question that was submitted online from Don. He had a question about how many accidents have occurred in a section that I believe we mentioned earlier in the presentation. I'm not sure which section is being referred to. Maybe we could speak generally to traffic data and accident data.
So for this meeting, we did in the study report, we do have detailed breakdown of traffic accidents and traffic data. What I can tell you from a general terms on the corridor is that there's very little concentration of accidents. They're very typical of what you'd find for an urban area, and Española definitely is a heavy traffic urban area. The accidents do not tend to be associated with geometry, like the curves on the roadway. They don't get worse in the existing geometry. They are slightly heavier at the intersections. The percentage of accidents that are not vehicle-on-vehicle type of accidents, but may involve a pedestrian or a bicycle, are I believe in the area, and again, Adam, if you recall, but I believe they're less than 5%. However, just by the nature of vehicles and bicycles and pedestrians, bicycle and pedestrian accidents account for about 15% of the serious injuries in the corridor. So even though they represent a small percentage of the total, the seriousness or the level of injury for those bicycle and pedestrian accidents is much heavier than the actual percentage of accidents. So that's part of the reason for the multimodal improvements to the corridor. I don't know if that answers the question, but the data is pretty normal for a corridor like this, and we certainly can make sure that information is posted clearly on our website so people can go in there and review it in detail in specific areas. Adam, do you have any comments you want to add to that?
Steve, I can add something to that. There were a total of, over the 6-year period prior to the beginning of the study of this from 2013 to 2019, there were a total of 490 injury crashes. Those are injuries and fatalities. So that gives you just some insight into the scale. That does not include the property damage only, or the rear enders and the side swipes that only damaged a car but didn't injure a person. But injury and fatalities are a total of 490 in the corridor from 2013 to 2019. Hopefully that helps some.
And Don, if we have not answered the question that you wanted addressed, please feel free to follow up with us afterwards. So you can email us. That's Española@SWCA.com. I receive those emails, and I'll be sure to forward them to the design team to make sure that that question's addressed properly. Okay, I'm going to queue up Earl, who had a question about median separations and causing problems with U-turns. So, Earl, I'm making you live now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, the concern was the medians that were put in on South Riverside, which is the lower end of the project. I guess you just talked about repaving on these. Those raised divided medians have actually caused quite a bit of issues with people U-turning in them. And I wondered how much of that was in this project. And there was another question I submitted online: is will we be able to submit comments after this public hearing? Because the presentation's been a little hard to follow on screen. The slides went really fast. It's hard to really understand the plan at this point.
I can quickly address the comment submissions, and then I'll turn it back to the design team to address your primary question about medians. As far as submitting questions and comments afterwards, absolutely. Please feel free to do so. There are a couple different ways to do that. I was notified that the number listed on the screen has a typo in it, but if you do want to call, it's 505-431-2678. You can email us, so that's just Española@swca.com. The website that you're streaming the public meeting off of right now also has a comment submission on it, so you can scroll down and just type in a comment, and that will come to me, and I'll direct it to the design team to address. So yeah, there are several different ways that you can follow up with us if you have more issues that you'd like addressed. So, okay, back to the design team and the median issues.
So I guess I'll again jump into this one. Currently, where we're at on this, because access to private development is such a high priority, I do not anticipate, we as a team do not anticipate a lot of significant changes to the median access. However, we do consider are looking at significant changes to the width of driveways and perhaps the opportunities to share driveways, if at all possible, to reduce those number conflict points. There are, I believe we've counted 290 driveways along the length of the corridor, and median access for that many driveways doesn't allow a lot of flexibility in changing the median access. As far as U-turns along the corridor, we are looking at, but these are engineering design details that will occur in the preliminary design. We're looking at alternatives of creating safe ways for U-turns to be permitted at intersections, but that's not a guarantee at this point. I think the question about U-turns mid-block, if people are doing it on the corridor, I agree with the congestion levels in Española. That's a precarious thing for people to do, and I suppose we could look into the idea of signing that would indicate that U-turns were not permitted along the corridor. I know right now there isn't any such signing, so that might be a consideration that we consider in the preliminary design. Adam or Hal, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that response?
I don't think so, Steve. I think you've got it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Earl, and please feel free to follow up with us if needed after the meeting. Okay, I am going to go to Manuel, who submitted a question online about whether the project involves infrastructure upgrades, and it looks like there was another question he had about whether a streetlight will be considered for the entrance to Fairview Elementary School due to the high amount of traffic there from the school and a future nursing home. So if someone could maybe answer the question about whether infrastructure upgrades, water, wastewater, electric, and gas line will be part of this project first. We'll start there.
So typically on a highway transportation project, utilities are the responsibility of either the local government authority that owns those utilities or the private utility that owns those. For us to put those elements into the project, they would have to provide funding to address those issues. That does not, however, include the storm drain system and the culverts under the highway. Those will be reconstructed as part of the project. But as far as water, sewer, electric, and gas, those are elements that can only be added if there is local participation or the private owner development. Paul, I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn for the district. Did you have any additional response to that one that you wanted to add?
Not much, Steve. Thank you. This is Paul Brasher. When the Department of Transportation has the occasion to reconstruct in an urban environment like that, what we do try to do is get with the utility owners, whether they're public or private, and to get them to do a couple of things. One is at least provide mapping of where their utilities are, what they are, and where they are. And secondly, if they have an interest in needing to replace them, whether they're upsizing or replacing them in deteriorated condition, they're typically invited the opportunity early enough before construction to get in to their own utility quarters and get out with whatever modifications they need to make to their utility. What we are really going to try to make sure of in this case is that once the road is eventually constructed, and it's when eventually it gets constructed, what we don't want is we would hate for the road to be excavated, dug up, the integrity of the paving be jeopardized for a trench of some kind, like for a sewer service connection, or to install the fire hydrant extension leg. And so what we would really try to do is get the or an electric extension or cable extension, some kind of dry utility. What we like to do is make sure that they have the opportunity to get in and get out, and then stay out once the road is constructed. But fundamentally, that's what I would add. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, and if someone could address whether a streetlight will be considered for the entrance to Fairview Elementary due to the high traffic.
I guess the first question I'd need to ask is we have identified 10 signalized intersections out there and a number of unsignalized intersections. We have done traffic counts on them. Currently, we didn't have any data that indicated there was warrants for adding any signals, but I think if we could get the additional information of the specific street name where the elementary school is located, and does it directly outlet onto New Mexico 68. If it doesn't directly outlet onto New Mexico 68, then the answer is there wouldn't be a consideration of a signal. However, if it does, then I'm sure we would be more than willing to look at the information and assess that.
So, Manuel, if that prompts you to want to follow up with the design team later to discuss that in detail more, please reach out and submit a comment or a question after the meeting has concluded. Okay, I'm going to go to Frank, who had a question about whether there's going to be better access to, I think, roads, instead of having to take turns to access residential roads. Frank lives on 68 North, and the highway is a mess. So, Frank, I'm making you live now.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Frank.
Yes, we can.
Hello. Yes, I don't live in Española, but we do a lot of our business in Española, our traffic. And those mediums down there are a mess. And just like out here on 68 North, they took out a lot of our access roads and they called it inconvenience. Are they going to do a lot of inconvenience there on 68 in Española too? Because that's what causes a lot of the accidents. And also, I wanted to say that this last week when they finished off Oñate, the road off of 68 going to 285, they did a shitty ass job. That road they didn't even clean it up or anything. That is bad work. And whoever the project manager is that let that go, they should be fired.
I can't speak to the work that is outside of this corridor. I will tell you that as we discussed,
it is in the corridor.
Access,
it is in the corridor. You guys just finished it.
I'm not sure where. I'm not sure where
you're
talking
you guys,
about.
It's 68 to Oñate going to 285. You guys addressed that corridor in your briefing. They just put out a news segment last week that was closed for a week, and it just opened up this week. And I went through it, and that they just resurfaced it, but they resurfaced it like my butt. I don't know who the project manager is on that, but they didn't go back and check their work. And then my other question is how many of you guys live in this area that knows what's really going on instead of just doing surveys? Because you guys really need to see what's going on over here. The traffic in Española and the traffic north of Española going to Taos is a mess. And it's not, you can talk about driver's etiquette. There is none over here. There is nothing. I wish you guys would live in the area so you guys can address these issues that we are having here instead of doing it from your offices or from the sky. Live here and address them.
So we do visit the area regularly. I'm on a regular basis, and we do review the issues. I know there is construction underway, and there are temporary detours north of Española that are currently underway, which are not part of the finished construction. They're in order to make some temporary connections. The specific area that we're here to talk about tonight, and I understand that you have issues. There is district.
I hear you.
Excuse me, sir.
I hear you.
Excuse me. Let me finish. We do have district people here tonight. They can look into things that are outside this specific corridor, which is the 4.5 miles that we've been talking about, and we can address that on a different format. But with regard to this corridor, our plans are not to eliminate any access that's currently there today, but we will be making modifications to that access so that it's safer. And I think that's the best I can answer your question. I cannot speak to work that somebody on a different project in a different location are doing. I don't know if the district wants to respond to the question, but
maybe Javier or Paul weigh in as well to offer.
This is Paul Brasher.
That opinion.
Hey, is the construction you're talking about that work on Oñate? The resurfacing of Oñate recently up to the bridge from the east side and then beyond the bridge on the west side. Is that the project you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's the one you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Okay, that
who inspected
it? That piece of road is not. That piece of road isn't part of this project. However, I would be glad to talk to you about that. In fact, I'll give you my phone number right now, and you can call me, and I'll step through that with you. Okay. So I'm Paul Brasher. I'm the District 5 engineer. My phone number is 505-469-2194. 469-2194. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. And while we're at it, I'll talk to you about other stuff we have coming up for the next of a year or so. Okay, I'll be glad to talk to you about that. This is not that project. Okay, but I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Okay.
Okay.
So
and then
give me a
the
call.
Gentleman was talking about
give me a call.
That last. I will. That gentleman was talking about that traffic light on 68 going to the elementary school. It is adjacent. It is right there on 68, and that is a mess too. That's why I asked if people live in the area, they would know about that stuff. If you guys come and visit during the peak times, you'd know about it, and you can address it properly.
Which signal are you talking about now? Is that
the entrance to Fairview Elementary? That road, I don't know what the name of it is, but it is adjacent to 68. For the traffic light there.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
Mr.
will.
Cordova, I just want to say, Mr. Cordova, I understand the frustrations, and what I would like to say is this project is here to resolve some of these things. You know, we're trying to address issues on the roadway, the congestion, the safety, the accessibility for, you know, pedestrians and bicyclists and people of all.
I understand that, but
yes,
but Española is growing, and the traffic over here it's just a mess between Santa Fe and Taos. It's just a mess.
Right.
It is
bad. Right, and I get it. And we've done, you know, studies of the traffic, and we've counted it over multiple days. So we do have a good understanding of what the traffic circumstances and situations are. And the goal of this project is to resolve those. But understand that there are there are many factors that we're trying to balance in developing the improvements, and traffic congestion is certainly a big one of those, but there are many things that we're trying to balance here in developing improvements that meet all the needs of all the users of the roadway. So thank you for your comment. We understand that, and reach out to Mr. Brasher regarding the other project, but just want you to know that we're here to try to resolve some of those issues. So thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cordova, it's Paul Brasher. Please call me. Okay?
I will. Mm-hmm.
I'd appreciate it. Okay? I would like to talk to you about this. Thank you.
For the audience, I would like to just let you know that it appears the street that everybody is talking about at the elementary school is called Calle Hacienda, I believe, and it looks like, just on the map looking at it, that it is about 1,000 feet south of Fairview Avenue. That would have some impact on the options of signalizing, but I'm sure we can take the opportunity to look at what improvements we can make, whether they involve a signal or other road improvements to enhance the safety at that intersection.
Okay, I do want to give a 15-minute warning. We have about 15 minutes left scheduled for this meeting, so we're going to try and get through as many of the questions that we've had submitted as possible. We've had quite a few questions submitted regarding bus stops, bus pullouts. So in order to just address that as a kind of a blanket issue, to address quite a few submitted questions, Steve, can you talk about how that's going to be incorporated into the design?
Yes. We're working closely with the transit authority in the area that provides bus service in the area. There are actually a lot of new and planned improvements that to the existing bus stops in the area. Our general consensus is some of them may have to be, of the new ones, may have to be adjusted to fit the new curb lines and such, but our plan is, first of all, to maintain the existing bus stops. In a few cases, we may have to shift them a few hundred feet because of right-of-way impacts, but our plans are to basically do that. And we're also looking at the resources available for bus stop improvements to perhaps supplement the cost of dealing with those on the job. But they are part of the plan, and that doesn't mean that all bus stops will come with a covered patio cover on them or awning, but we're working closely with them and looking at the available resources to make upgrades where we can, and to meet the safety standards that are required by that transit authority. I don't know if that answers it, because it's a pretty generic answer. Again, I don't know if anybody from the district would like to jump into that question, but that's kind of the general gist of how we're approaching it. Is we're working closely with the transit authority to make the improvements consistent with their requirements.
Well, Steve, this is Paul Brasher, and I think the transit authority the district is the expert on what the needs are, and if you are working with them closely as possible, as I figure you are, then their needs will be met because their needs are aimed at serving the community. I mean, they are really a first line of service, like a utility almost. And if they will advise you of what they need, and if you will incorporate that into the plan, then I think we will have addressed. Because I mentioned a little while ago multimodal mobility, and that transit is one of pedestrian transit and bicycles. And I think that our plan addresses all those. So if you're working closely with the transit, then I think that's well taken care of. People are well served. Thank you, Steve.
All right, I'm
Thanks,
going
Paul.
to hop onto another comment that was submitted by Pat or Patrick, who owns the Trading Post. Pat, I'm going to make you live so you can ask your question about access and the alignment.
Hello? Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, great.
Well taken care of. People are well served. Thanks, Steve.
So, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to hop onto another comment. Goodness, it seems like we have feedback. By Pat or
Okay.
Patrick, who owns the Trading Post. I'm going to make you live so you can ask your question about access.
Okay.
And the alignment.
Great, thank you.
Hello?
Hello.
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, great.
Okay. Yeah,
Sorry,
we're getting
start-
a lot of feedback, so I'm going to actually mute you.
All right, I'm going to hop
Yeah.
on to
Okay. Sorry, that was a little interesting. Okay, so the question I'm just going to read out loud. Pat owns the triangle at the Y, so the Chimayo Trading Post. So he says it seems like there's going to be major impacts to his business. So will the DOT be reaching out to potential impacted businesses?
So just as a point of clarification, the answer is yes, first of all, that we will be reaching out to businesses. And, a lot of people think a smaller community, that it's a simpler job. I will tell you that the traffic control for this job is as complex as you have for any urban project in the state of New Mexico. It's a route that doesn't have a street grid that supports it, so maintaining access during construction will present challenges. That said, we want to work closely with the business owners so that we maintain an acceptable level of access and allow them to get across the work zones to their businesses. In this particular, with the caller, your trading post, is that at Paseda and Yate where you're referring to as the Y, or is it at a different location?
So he is no longer live, so I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay. We basically, what we plan on doing in the construction is we will shift. We're probably going to do the construction in 1 mile segments at a time. We've been looking at it even as we speak. We're looking at the constructability issues, and we plan on putting traffic all on one side of the road and building the other half of the road. That will require us to make temporary connections across the work zone to get to private businesses. We're also planning on at least temporarily changing the phasing on signals so that we can actually turn traffic around so that they don't necessarily have to make left turns in the middle of the work zone, that they can access the business by turning around at both ends of the project. But yes, the basic question there is we definitely plan on contacting the property owners as we develop our plans for the access modifications, and also in the discussion of how we can maintain access to their particular businesses during construction.
Okay, so The next question we have is whether an overpass or underpass was considered for Pope Avenue.
So the first thing I will tell you is that although Pope Avenue has a fairly significant level of traffic, it does not rise to the traffic volumes that typically warrant any kind of a grade separation or an interchange. The fact of the matter is it actually doesn't even rise to the volume levels that typically warrant a signalized intersection. However, the roundabout is a unique type of an intersection that we've recommended because it will slow traffic in the area and it will still allow a good circulation of traffic. It handles a significant volume of traffic, particularly when local traffic is trying to access a higher volume corridor like New Mexico 68. So I think the answer to the question is we of course always look at that, but this intersection doesn't have the volumes that would justify a grade separated interchange, like with an overpass or an underpass.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, next question. I'm trying to get as many addressed as possible before we have to log off. Stacy has a question of when is this project scheduled to start? Javier or Paul, do you want to talk kind of about how that breakout works and funding schedules, et cetera?
This is Paul Brasher. So, we launched this study some time back to determine what the needs are and to generate some alternatives, recommendations that address all the things that we think we've addressed pretty well. The mobility and economy and so forth. And we think we've done that. But this is just a study. And I think as Steve Harris may have mentioned to you throughout this, or one of the other members of the team, that we think that the project is going to be designed and constructed in about in 3 phases, each one of them approximately like 1.5 miles in length. And we think the first phase is on the order of $20 million. Now, we don't even have that designed yet. This is the study which would roll into a design. And I think it was mentioned that the design of just the first phase, the first 1.5 miles, first 3 phases, would probably be designed by, I think we said midsummer of 2024. Now, where the money comes from typically is out of our program, our statewide transportation improvement program. And right now, our statewide transportation improvement program, it's called STIP, S-T-I-P, doesn't have funding for this project. In other words, this isn't on the list yet. But when the project is designed, when eventually it is designed in the first phase or the second phase and ultimately the third phase, then as funding becomes available, and the funding for this would compete with the funding for dozens of other projects throughout just this district alone. Eventually, the project will get funded and go to construction. But at this rate, I would not imagine that this would go to construction any sooner than, say, 2026, 2027, something like that, to get started. Because it won't even be designed till halfway through 2024, and that's at best, unless we were to receive some sort of special appropriation from the state legislature just for this project, or at least for the first phase. It's probably not going to happen any sooner than that. But it's not construction is not imminent, and what we will make sure that everybody is advised of what the construction is going to be. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, we also have a question about the intersection with McCurdy, and one of the design team members did comment that we do have a study different study ongoing for that intersection. Can maybe Paul speak to that?
Yes, this is Paul Brasher. We did launch a study of the whole McCurdy corridor. As you are probably aware, it has a lot of difficulties of its own, right-of-way drainage, pedestrian, bicycle, pavement condition, to name a few. And so we will be going through the same study process that we are right now. We'll have the same sort of public meeting to discuss what we do ultimately with McCurdy. But that's how that will be taken care of at the time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Okay. Will streetlights be dark sky friendly? That is a question from Norman.
Norman, the answer to that is yes. All street lighting that's done on highway projects under current design standards meet the dark sky standards. That'll be a big change from what's out there today. I believe you have 5 different generations of street lighting along the length of Española, from 528 to the northern city limits. What the main feature you'd notice when you see that kind of lighting is, instead of having a dome-shaped lens on the bottom that scatters the light into neighborhoods, they call it light pollution. The newer fixtures have a flat bottom to them, and the light does not migrate away from the road like the old system. So yes, it will be dark skies lighting.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Okay, so we are essentially at time. I do apologize to everyone who didn't get their question addressed. In the last few minutes before we have to hop off, I want to make sure that everyone, especially those people who didn't have their question addressed in time, that they know how to submit the questions or comments to us after this meeting has wrapped up. So, a few ways to do that. Call us directly, 505-431-2678. You can email us. That's just Española@swca.com. And you can submit a comment directly on the website. For those of you who are streaming this public meeting online, you're already on that same website, so just scroll down and you'll see a comment field. You can message us directly that way. So that's another way. If old-fashioned postal service is your game, then you can also mail us directly, and that address is up on the screen as well. So you've got several options to reach out and make sure that your questions, concerns, etc. are addressed. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who participated. We really appreciate the responses to the poll questions and the questions that were submitted to keep the conversation going. Again, please reach out, and we'll keep everyone informed as the study progresses and additional public meetings are made available. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.